Hey, good Friday morning, guys. I'm going to pull up this live on my phone right in front of me so I can try to see comments as you guys put them in while I'm doing the live stream. If you guys do have questions, we're going to get in depth here on Dorian. The latest outlook was just released about 10 minutes ago, and we do have some changes. Dorian is continuing to strengthen. So, again, I'm going to try to pull this up on my phone before we get started in case y'all have any questions. Feel free to shoot them in the comments. There we go. I should be able to see these as they come in now. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. We're going to get started taking a look at the latest look at Dorian there on the satellite imagery. You can see as the sun rises over it, we're getting a better look at it. It is now a Category 2 hurricane. It was upgraded to a Category 2 yesterday, so that does remain unchanged. Here's the latest track, the latest stats on what we're seeing. Max winds at 110 miles per hour. That is as high as it can get for a Cat 2. We are expecting this to become a major hurricane, 111 miles per hour. That's Category 3. So we're right there. We're going to see that happen today. Dorian is still in the western Atlantic, now north of the Virgin Islands, and the latest track takes it right up into south central Florida. So there are some changes, some notable changes that we need to discuss about Dorian compared to what we were looking at yesterday. So first, the intensity forecast, those still remain Category 4 upon landfall there in south central Florida. Now, the track has shifted a bit south. This morning, the GFS and the Euro runs, that's the best model agreement that we've seen between those two so far in this whole lifespan of Dorian. They are less than 50 miles apart, right down on the Treasure Coast near south central Florida. Now, that is one change. Again, the track has shifted southwards. The other one, the bigger one, that's the timing. Dorian is really looking to slow down. Right now, we are looking at a Tuesday landfall. Now, yesterday, we did these Facebook Lives, and we were talking about Labor Day landfall, but Dorian does look to kind of lose some of that influence from its steering flow by late weekend, early next week, and really slow down in the Bahamas. And that's not good for a couple of reasons. First off, more time over water. More time you get over water, especially those warm waters with low shear, that gives Dorian more time to strengthen out over the open waters. It's already forecast to become a Category 4. We don't need Dorian to strengthen anymore, but that is one kind of hindrance that we could see with the slower track. The second one is that if Dorian stalls out, starts moving slower, we're going to be seeing some hefty rainfall totals. Some models are starting to indicate that essentially up and down that entire I-95 corridor, looking at heavy rainfall. So again, you see those max winds, 110 miles per hour. Here's the Saffir-Simpson scale. This is what we use to kind of determine what hurricanes are, what strength they are. I'm blocking out Cat 4, Cat 5. That's 131 to 155, and that's also 156 plus. But it's at 110 right now. That is just below a Category 3. So 1 mile per hour more. We're going to get a Category 3 hurricane here later on in the day. We zoom in on the track, get a better look at some of this timing for you. Again, that is one of the biggest changes in this morning's update. We saw that earlier at 5 a.m. The track is just really slowing down. Yesterday we were talking about that Monday landfall on Labor Day. You look where the storm is now on Monday, it's still out there in parts of the northwest Bahamas. So that gives folks a little bit more time to prepare for south central Florida here, even if we do see any impacts or not. But you should be assessing that readiness plan for us here in the Panhandle, the Big Bend, southern Georgia. For the folks on the east coast up and down that I-95 corridor, they should be preparing for a major hurricane here by early next week. So getting all those preparations done. Again, there's been things circulating all over social media. You're seeing the typical pictures with the lines for gas stations getting sold out of gas, stores selling out of bread, water, all that stuff. If you know folks down there, if you are watching from south central Florida, get those preps done. The time is now. You're going to want to do that before the weekend, before the crowds get too big. So let's keep scrolling through, talking all about Dorian for you. Hurricane watch is now in effect for the northwest Bahamas. You see these kind of purple shaded areas. That's where you got the watches. Hurricane watch means that hurricane conditions are expected or possible within the next 48 hours. So that's 2 days. We're not seeing any watches, any warnings, any advisories for Florida yet. We will in the next couple of days as Dorian inches closer. So there's a handful of factors here on Dorian's track and what is influencing that. It's going to be that high pressure system and how strong it is and how quick it moves east out into the Atlantic as that ridge builds. The quicker it moves east, the quicker Dorian can get up north. The stronger it is, the stronger steering flow. So we do look to see a weaker flow for Dorian. Let me go back to that graph again. skip through it so quick. If we can play through it. There we go. So this high pressure is building off into the Atlantic. That's going to help steer it. So the sooner this high pressure moves off towards the east, the sooner Dorian can kind of make that northward turn. Now, if it's too strong, the high pressure, and it just really blocks Dorian from getting up there, that's when you're seeing those potential scenarios of Dorian reaching the Gulf, which we can break down now. So again, pay attention to the cone, not the exact track. You have that cone of uncertainty for a reason. It just kind of shows you the range of possibilities, and that uncertainty that extends beyond 3, 4, 5 days out, and that's about when it's going to be impacting us here in the entire Sunshine State. So you zoom in. We're going to break down a couple of these possible scenarios. We're using this graphic yesterday. We're talking about it this morning to try to give you a grasp of best case, worst case scenarios, and most likely scenarios. So you see, we got 3 little hurricane icons here, one on the right side of the cone, one on the left side of the cone, then right up into the center of the track. So you got about 3 different scenarios here. Again, there's wiggle room. This is a very simplified way to break it down, a very intuitive way to know what kind of impacts you can expect where you live. Now, I've seen some comments, people saying exactly where you live, where you're from, what kind of impacts will I get. We don't know. It's too far out to make any determination like that. I can't tell you. But this is more on a regional basis. So this is for the Big Bend in South Georgia. If you're watching from South Florida, if you're watching from Central Florida, this graphic is not for you. It does not kind of convey those impacts accurately. This is for the Big Bend. This is for South Georgia on what we might see. So you got about 3 different cases. Now, most models, the National Hurricane Center, we're getting into agreement of that South Central Florida landfall and then going up through the peninsula. That is the yellow track. This is what most models are kind of converging on, but there's still uncertainties. We could still see either of the other impacts. So let's talk about the yellow one first. Again, this is probably what's most likely to happen. That landfall in East Coast and then Dorian riding up. As that high pressure breaks down, it will allow Dorian to turn northward. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean Dorian's going to go straight towards Tallahassee or the Big Bend, but as it rides up the state, we can see it kind of move off the coast. We can see it go straight up north, but it will make that northward turn eventually. The sooner the better for us, to be honest. This yellow track, though, as I mentioned, it's kind of what some models are converging on. That's what the National Hurricane Center is looking at. This would be a medium impact. Most likely with this scenario, we get a weakening tropical system. If you remember, we're going to be looking at your forecast track again. That was just released at 8 a.m. But on Wednesday, they had a Category 1 hurricane. That's about a day after making landfall. Category 1 hurricane right around Central Florida, getting to ride up I-75. So by that time, you would have probably in North Florida, I-10 area, tropical storm, maybe weakened to a tropical depression. Now this is medium impact. Tropical storm, tropical depression that's been over land for a couple hundred miles, that is not the worst case scenario for us. It's not the best case scenario. We don't want a tropical system to impact us, but if it does, tropical depression, you'll get periods of gusty winds. You'll get some heavy rainfall that you'd expect with periods of cloudiness, but that spares us from anything like Michael or any major hurricane impact like they would be seeing down along the Treasure Coast or on the east coast of Florida. That's the medium impact, probably the most likely scenario at this point. A weakening tropical system riding up 75 and up through the peninsula towards southern Georgia. You have the low impact. This is if that high pressure is a little bit weaker or if it moves east a little sooner. This would be Dorian really slowing down in the Bahamas, stalling out on the east coast of Florida, and then riding up the coast, whether it makes landfall in the Carolinas, whether it stays offshore, kind of like what Hurricane Matthew did back in 2016. It just rode up the east coast and right up off into the ocean. It only made landfall as a Cat 1, but it was a Cat 4 right offshore of the east coast. So this is a low impact for us here in the Big Bend. And why? Because if you have a storm that's staying in the Atlantic, whether it's making landfall in North Florida moving north or making landfall in the Carolinas, you might see some rain, some tropical moisture move through. That's about it, really nothing else. So that's the low impact. That's our best case scenario locally. Worst case scenario, you see there's a question mark here. Why is there a question mark? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that the worst case scenario will unfold. But if there were to be a worst case scenario, this is how it would start out. More of the South Florida landfall moving west across the state. If it went over the Everglades, that wouldn't really weaken Dorian too fast. Everglades, there's a lot of moisture there. It's all swampy, marshy. Tropical systems can feed off that, and it weakens slower. So if you see Dorian make landfall towards South Florida, kind of move across the state, and then spit out over towards Fort Myers area and get out into the Gulf of Mexico, that's not ideal. Again, that doesn't guarantee a worst case scenario, but if you give Dorian the potential to make it into the Gulf, start re-strengthening, and then you can see, well, what we've seen over the past few years when hurricanes get in the Gulf. It could intensify quickly, and then you're talking the entire Gulf Coast on the table for a potential hurricane, tropical system landfall. Again, that doesn't guarantee that it's going to be a worst case scenario for here in Tallahassee. If the storm spit out in the Gulf and it went over towards the west, over towards Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, that's another low impact scenario for us, but high impact for those folks. Again, worst case scenario would be Dorian making landfall in South Florida, crossing over through Fort Myers in the Gulf, and then riding up towards the Appalachian Bay, and there we are, looking at a hurricane knocking on the doorstep. Again, that is a low likelihood scenario, but it's worth breaking down all the possibilities we could see, because there are still a lot of possibilities on the table. We're still a ways out from getting any impact from Dorian. What do we got next here for you? Just breaking down kind of some of the basics on it. Right now it's in the western Atlantic. It's going to be working towards the Bahamas today. We are expecting a major hurricane today. It's at 110 miles per hour. Category 3 is 111. So the next advisory, good chance that we're seeing Category 3. It's going to be making that approach through the Bahamas by late weekend into Labor Day, approaching the east coast of Florida. Again, that landfall, as Dorian slows down in the Bahamas, looking at a later landfall today, forecasted for Tuesday morning down towards the Treasure Coast. Those expected trends, again, the latest outlooks have showed you that Dorian is expected to slow down, and that has a lot of implications on the forecast in terms of intensifying over the water more. The more time Dorian has in the Bahamas, the more time it has to feed off those warm waters and strengthen. And the slower Dorian moves inland on the state, if Dorian stalled out just offshore or on land here in Florida, that would be worst case for those folks down in the peninsula, closer to the I-95 corridor. I'm going to read you from the National Hurricane Center's latest discussion that they just released. Again, the threat would be for heavy rainfall at that point if Dorian stalled out, on top of all the threats that you already get from a Category 4. But the National Hurricane Center said this morning, Dorian's slow motion when it's near Florida, placing some areas of the state at least increasing risk of prolonged, drawn-out event of strong winds, dangerous storm surge, and heavy rainfall. So again, if Dorian slows down, stalls out, whether it be in the Bahamas, that'll give it more time to strengthen, stalls out over Florida, that will just make inland flooding, flash flooding a bigger deal than it needs to be when you already have the damaging wind and the storm surge that you're dealing with from a major hurricane. So that's something that we need to watch out for. Here's a graphic from the National Hurricane Center. This shows probabilities for at least tropical storm force winds. Those probabilities near 100% down through parts of south central Florida, right on the east coast there. And we're seeing the entire state of Florida at least given a chance. We got low chances here in the north part of the state, down to 20-30%, which isn't high, but again, this goes 5 days out. We're going to be seeing this kind of inch closer to us as we get further on in the forecast. And I don't want to pile on here after talking about Dorian. This morning, the National Hurricane Center is identifying another tropical wave off the coast of Africa. Highlighted it there again. This is just off the coast of Africa. This thing has a trek, a couple weeks if it does become anything, but you're looking at this potential development area right there in the central Atlantic. They're giving this a 20% chance to develop into a tropical system in the next 5 days. We got a long way to go about that. I don't want to spend too much time worrying about that or talking about that, because right now this is about Dorian. Real quick, before we get back to more Dorian details, this is a reminder: you can download our Storm Shield app. You can get those watches warnings pushed straight to your phone. You can customize them. We can geotag you. I got it on my phone. It's not going to wake you up, but it's going to give you access to radar data, current temperatures, our forecast data. So make sure you download that. We're going to be pushing this, making sure that you all get it to stay safe during the storm. Let's go back to the track of Dorian. I want to look at that. Here we go. So the latest track, you got Dorian, 110 mile per hour winds on your Saffir-Simpson scale. We're 1 mile per hour away from a major hurricane. We're going to see that today. This is this kind of area that we're looking at Dorian, not necessarily maybe stalling out, but slowing down. Dorian slows down over the Bahamas. That's going to give Dorian more time to gain strength over those warm waters, feeding off that. So Category 4, that's strong enough. Maybe in further outlooks, if they decide to bump up the intensity, I don't want to talk about a Cat 5 making landfall on parts of the East Coast, but we kind of have to watch these trends. What's it looking like for the Big Bend with the latest track? Again, the latest track still, if we have Dorian, we can zoom in on Florida here. You have landfall. This is Tuesday, 2 a.m. Again, yesterday we were talking about Labor Day landfall all day, but Dorian is really showing probably some weaker steering currents here once it makes it towards the Bahamas, which would lead to a slower motion. And at that point, over water, it's going to intensify if it's moving slower over land once it makes landfall in Florida. Again, 24 hours from areas down near Fort Pierce, West Palm to Orlando. That's a slow mover. That storm is not moving quickly at all. We need it to move quicker, although, again, Category 4, that's not good in any scenario. I'm not going to say that a quicker moving storm, slower moving storm is better, because a Category 4 hurricane, it's not good. But if it moves slow, that is really going to bump up that potential for flash flooding, inland flooding, up and down the entire state. The Weather Prediction Center, they release every couple hours their rainfall totals for the next 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 days. The next 7 days, they have forecasted rainfall totals in excess of a foot for some areas in Florida, some up to 15 to 20 inches. That's not ideal, because if we're piling that on top of what is already a devastating major hurricane, Category 4, whatever it could be, we saw what Michael did over towards the Emerald Coast and up through parts of southwest Georgia. That was a quick-moving storm, a Category 5. So if you combine that with a slower mover storm, that's putting you more time in those damaging winds, the most damaging ones, and that's giving the storm more time to just dump heavy rainfall. So those are concerning trends, that Dorian is moving slower. That is for at least the peninsula. Locally speaking, a slower moving storm would likely mean it would curve off into seas sooner, which again, that's probably a better case for us. Again, that's localized. This graphic right here, if you're watching in South Florida, Central Florida, it's not for you. This graphic is for the folks up in the Panhandle because, again, low impact for the Carolinas. If it makes landfall there, it's not the same story. For us, it is, though. So if you're in Tallahassee watching, anywhere in North Florida along I-10, anywhere in South Florida, this graphic is kind of catered to our coverage area. The worst case scenario, again, there's a question mark there for a reason. It does not guarantee a worst case scenario, but if the storm spits out in the Gulf on the side of southwest Florida, and you're looking at the potential for Dorian to get stronger out there in the Gulf. And that doesn't guarantee it's going to make a landfall in North Florida, but it puts the entire Gulf Coast on watch for another landfalling hurricane. That red track, again, I don't want to make comparisons here, but that's kind of the same path that Katrina took, and that's the same path that Andrew took. And if Dorian does make landfall as anticipated at its forecast now, it would be the strongest landfalling hurricane on the East Coast since Andrew. Again, that's 92. That is 27 years ago, and Florida sees a lot of hurricanes. So what we're looking at here, worst case scenario for us would be something like that, where Dorian could spit back out in the Gulf. Medium impact if you get a weakening tropical system, which is looking like the most likely scenario at this point. There's still lots of possibilities. Low impact if we see this thing curve off into sea. That would be ideal for us, as we would just get a little bit of wraparound rain there. Kylie, should we evacuate satellite Melbourne? That decision should probably be made upcoming this weekend. I think it's a good idea to at least get off the beach and move a little further inland off the barrier island for those areas. I'm actually from this area, and I've been telling my mom, she's been making all those preparations, filling up the gas tank, buying the supplies that she needs, just in case we do see a Category 4 hurricane approach. So at this point, you still have till Tuesday when we're looking at a potential landfall. Tuesday morning, like 2 a.m., so really not till Tuesday, but your preparation should be complete if you're on the east coast of Florida, by 95, by the weekend, by Saturday, Sunday at the latest. That way, you can be ready on Monday, on Labor Day, if you do need to make that move, evacuate, get off the coastal communities. Here in the Big Bend, in the Panhandle, southern Georgia, it's not as urgent, I would say. It's not a good idea or not a bad idea to go fill up the gas tank, assess that readiness kit, but you don't have to go scrambling yet. There's still lots of uncertainty, lots of time. Wakulla, Franklin County still kind of falls under this general umbrella of impacts. Again, these impacts are more regional than exactly local on what we're expecting for our entire area. Taylor County, yeah, that's one of those things where a medium impact scenario could be a high impact for Taylor County thanks to rainfall. What they don't need is more rainfall. A few weekends ago, they saw more than 2 feet of rain and some serious flooding down towards Steinhatchee. More rain would not be good for those folks. So this is medium impact again, regionally, but locally speaking for Taylor County, that would not be a good idea. Worst case, again, that has a question mark because you don't guarantee worst case scenario if this thing comes out in the Gulf. It still could be low impact if it goes further west, but you just can't rule out some of these scenarios. This is low probability. What about Adel, Georgia? Becca, kind of the same thing. Leon County, kind of the same thing. This graphic is just kind of a regional North Florida, Big Bend, South Georgia, what we're expecting for impacts. You can't exactly localize some of these, whether it's Tallahassee or Live Oak or Adel or Bainbridge. There's not much of a difference at this point, as we are still a little bit too far out to determine exact local and pinpoint impacts. If you're talking about the East Coast, there's a little bit more confidence there that that storm will be making an East Coast landfall early next week. But where we are here in North Florida, South Georgia, you just can't exactly make that call yet. So this is a very vague but straightforward kind of intuitive thinking here to look at what we can expect in our coverage area. The best case scenario is if Dorian goes off into the sea. Worst case, possibly if it goes into the Gulf. That medium impact if you have a weakening tropical system, but the medium impact not exactly ideal, but it could be worse. For areas like Taylor County, that could be one of the worst cases, as they'll be seeing additional rainfall. So again, for everyone asking, Madison County, Lowndes County, it's kind of the same thing. This is a very generalized graphic for our coverage area, though. If you're watching from South Florida, Central Florida, this graphic really doesn't do much for you, as it's not really catered to you. This is for our coverage area. If we get medium impact as our coastal flooding, that's definitely a possibility, especially if this is a slower moving storm. Again, that's kind of the main concern here, is the track has really slowed down over the past 24 hours with these outlooks from the National Hurricane Center. Yesterday we were talking about a landfalling hurricane on Labor Day. This morning we're talking about a landfalling hurricane on Tuesday. So we are kind of pushing that timeline back, and that means that Dorian will have slower motion through the Bahamas, and that would lead to more time over water. More time over water for an already strong hurricane gives it potential to intensify even more. We don't need that. It's already forecast to be a Category 4 upon landfall. Don't want to talk about Category 5. So it's predicted to make landfall. You see these winds Monday morning, 140, 130. If you look at your hurricane scale and how close we are to a Cat 5, that's 156 plus, still a little bit of a ways out. So not exactly forecasting a Michael-like storm yet, but Category 4 strong enough where it doesn't really make too much of a difference. Just kind of once you get a major hurricane making landfall, you're going to get some serious impacts. So let's talk about, again, this impact map, because we got a lot of people asking questions there in the comments. I'm trying to read them. I got it set up on my phone right here.
They told me to come in so you can take a break.
You want to talk about the hurricane? We got Angela here. You want to break it down on sandbags before I get more in detail? We got Angela Green here, our morning anchor, hanging out.
No, a lot of updates. I know I saw some people talking about the governor is going to make some comments. So in about 30 minutes, Ron DeSantis is going to have a press conference from the Emergency Operations Center. So we're waiting to see what kind of updates come from him and how they're preparing. Hi. We're doing live Facebook, sorry. But a lot of information is coming up as the day develops. Sandbags have been set up at different locations across every county in the area. Right now, all 67 counties in Florida are under that emergency declaration right now. And what that does is it helps move resources from county to county. The National Guard can be deployed at this point in time. But sandbags, if you don't know how to do them, I don't know how to do them, people will be out there to help you. You can get up to 25 sandbags at the Tallahassee location. They're opening up from 7 in the morning until 7 p.m. every night up until the storm hits. Wakulla, the Gadsden County area, Taylor County is opening up shelters just in case. So they're preparing. I don't think anybody's taking chances with this storm right now. So on our website, WTXL.tv, we have a lot of resources. We've been telling you about them. We went to Walmart last night, and shelves are empty there already. I talked to some of the corporate people there yesterday. They're not taking chances either. They're going to be restocking. So it's interesting. This is my first hurricane in Florida. I've covered them in eastern North Carolina before, but I feel like people are taking this very serious right now.
Yeah, after Michael, it's well warranted.
Yeah.
I think that people, it's like the PTSD after storms. You don't want to kind of take the route of not preparing and saying that it might not hit you, because it's worth it to be prepared either way. We're probably going to, it's late August. We're going to see more tropical systems
Very
here.
much so.
So, what do we say? Everyone going crazy at gas stations, at grocery stores. I saw Cass, our chief meteorologist, Casanova
Yeah.
Nurse. He's posted a picture on Facebook yesterday of a line at the gas station.
Already.
Yesterday, yeah, that's Thursday. We're like, what, 5-6 days away from any impacts here. So people are on it in the Panhandle. I commend you for that. Don't let up on your preparation.
Yeah, don't. I know there were some rumors going around that some of the gas stations are running out of gas, but it's not because of the hurricane yet in the Big Bend area. We did check in with them. I think they were having an issue at one of the stations, but just be prepared. Don't panic at this point. In our area, at least, I think they moved the game from Jacksonville to Tallahassee for a reason. We're a little bit safe right now. I'm not trying to forecast or tell anybody what to do right now, but still a few days left beforehand.
Yeah.
But the local counties, 2 weeks ago we had those heavy rainfalls, and still places in, I think, the Gadsden area, the Quincy area, still kind of recovering from flooding that they had there just 2 weeks ago. 30 inches of rain is there. So they are just preparing. Some of the roads in that area still shut down because the bridges there collapsed. So we're going to be following up on those areas, and just, follow our website, WTXL.tv, for the latest. I wanted to come in so he can take a break for a little bit and breathe, but I'll let you finish. But we come on at noon. We're following that press conference in about 20 minutes now. The Governor Ron DeSantis kind of giving us an update on what's happening here in the area. So make sure you join us. We'll be live streaming that too.
Yes,
All right.
yes,
Okay.
we will.
Bye.
We'll give you one more run through the forecast. There's 2 donuts over there, Angela. I'll
Great,
let you
great,
pick
great.
which one you want. You got donuts here delivered to us. Would you not recommend travel to Universal Studios? Bernice, probably not the best idea. Maybe if you went like Saturday and got it done with early this weekend, but once you start getting towards Monday, the end of the weekend, things are going to start getting a little dicier down on the peninsula. Jacoby, better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Yeah, that is exactly right. I really want people to pay attention to comments like that. That is important stuff. Again, it doesn't hurt to be prepared for anything potential, as even if you're prepared and you don't need it this time, there's another time that we're probably going to need it. You live in Florida, it's hurricane season, you know how it is. Wondering about Crawfordville and the coast. All right, Nancy, so this graphic right here that I'm showing, this is going to be a good one for you as I've been kind of talking over things. Angel was here helping out. This is a graphic that was kind of catered for our coverage area. The Big Bend, North Florida, South Georgia. So if you're watching this from anywhere else in the state, not really for you. But this kind of overlays, whatever you want to say, a potential case for us here in the Big Bend, no matter where the storm goes. If we get off in the Atlantic, if you get up more towards Georgia, Carolina's landfall, low impact. Not really worried about it, as that's just going to bring us a couple showers. Medium impact could be a high impact for some of us, though. Again, especially these areas towards Taylor County where you've experienced that flooding just a few weeks ago, river's still a bit swollen, and your ground is saturated, you don't need any more rain. Well, a slow-moving tropical system, even weak, whether it's weak into a tropical storm, a tropical depression, whatever it is, if it's stalled out or moving slow, that's going to bring us locally heavy rainfall with periods of frequent rainfall through the day. So that could be a high impact. Area wide, it's more of a medium impact. But again, that's going to be depending on where you live and how much rain you've seen lately. So confusing with the ensembles showing a Gulf trajectory. Yeah, Nancy, the ensembles, they're a good tool to kind of have in the toolkit in the back pocket to make these forecasts. But it's one of those things to really not latch onto, especially this far out. That is, again, just one tool that's being used. In the ensembles, I really like them to show the range of possibilities. That's what I'm trying to do with this graphic in a more kind of intuitive way. But those are not good to latch on to any certain track, because you could just as likely have this storm spit out in the Gulf as you could ride up the Atlantic coast and not be an issue. So it's nothing to latch onto or to be concerned about, especially locally here in North Florida. We are still far out, 5-6 days from any impact. By the middle of next week, that's when we could see the brunt of any potential impact. Again, that's still a ways out. So you have time to get your supplies, check that hurricane kit, make sure you got gas in the car, portable chargers, a generator if you have it, all that good stuff. But this is not something that you need to be, I would say, overly concerned about. Locally, is it going to rain at the FSU game? That is a good question. I did make a graphic for that. I don't think I have it for you here, though. Well, we got a game tomorrow at Doak. We got a home game. Surprise. What are we expecting for the game? It's exactly what you would expect for an August game at noon in Tallahassee. It is going to be hot tomorrow. Temperatures in the upper 80s, lower 90s around kickoff at noon. If you're going to the game and you're going to be tailgating beforehand, mix in some water with whatever else you're drinking. You want to be hydrated. It is going to be toasty. Again, it's a noon game in August in Tallahassee. The forecast kind of speaks for itself. We do have rain chances in tomorrow's forecast, but most of our shower storms is going to be after the game. Again, assuming it gets down around 2:30, 3 o'clock, we should be pretty much cleared up by then. How long have we been going here? Almost 30 minutes. So we're going to try to wrap this up for you here soon. Let me give you one more breakdown of this forecast. Latest forecast just came out at 8 a.m. Max winds at 110 miles per hour. We're going to be seeing a Category 3 hurricane today. It's going to turn into a major hurricane. Still forecast to make landfall Tuesday morning. That's later than we talked about yesterday. We're talking Labor Day yesterday. Today we're talking Tuesday. Dorian slowing down because of the lack of steering flow in the Bahamas. That could lead to further intensification, more time over the water. Also slowing down once it gets inland, which will lead to more flooding. Words from the National Hurricane Center. Dorian slow motion when it is near Florida, placing some areas of the state at an increasing risk of a prolonged drawn-out event of strong winds, dangerous storm surge, and heavy rainfall. So not only the impacts that quick-moving Category 4, Category 5 would bring you, like you saw towards Panama City, parts of the Panhandle in southern Georgia, but this also adds on the threat of some heavy rainfall in flash flooding, inland flooding. So just another threat that you don't really need to add there. I'm about to wrap this up for you guys here soon. If you shoot questions in the inbox, I'll try to go back and comment and check through some of them. We're going to be doing another one of these Facebook Lives after the 11 a.m. update. So your time now, 8:40, 2.5 hours from now. I'll be back doing another one of these. We'll talking about the latest outlook, what changed, what's new. If there's anything else to add for you, we will be doing that. In the meantime, if you want more of this information, again, you can always run this video back. You got 30 minutes of us talking about it. I'm sure you could find answers to your questions in there, or you can check online on our website. We got all the details on Dorian and your local forecast as well. Again, locally speaking, for today, it's going to be hot. It's going to be sunny for game day tomorrow. It's August, and it's a noon game. It's going to be hot, it's going to be sunny, and it's going to be humid. So make sure you're drinking water. Better wrap this up now, folks. Again, we'll be back here just after the 11 a.m. update. So if you want to be near your phone, if you want more information on what comes out on Dorian, I'll probably be back around 11:15ish. Probably won't be as long because we'll have to get ready for the midday show. But make sure you tune in, check online if you need any more information. If you have any questions, try to skim through this video if you can, because there's a really good chance that I probably answered it for you already, but I'll roll through the comments just in case. I hope you have a great morning. I'll be back here in a couple of hours. We'll be seeing you here soon.